This is Newnight with Stan Grant.
Melissa Conley Tyler, thank you very much for joining me here on Newnight. I want to ask you first of all about what it means for Australia to have this seat on the UN Security Council.
Well, it means that Australia is part of the discussions of global peace and security. The UN Security Council is the part of the United Nations that has the job of dealing with the situations that threaten peace and security, whether that's what's happening in Syria, whether it's North Korea, whether it's the ongoing mandate for Afghanistan. So having a seat at the table of the UN Security Council gives Australia a part of these discussions. And if you put that together with our hosting of G20 over the next year, we're in the wonderful position of being part of the premier forums of both peace and security and of economic discussion.
Indeed, what does it say about Australia's position in the world when you put those two together? For a country that's widely acknowledged as a middle power, we seem to have far greater influence perhaps in our population and so on would suggest.
Well, it's certainly a happy coincidence. It has been a long time between drinks for us on the UN Security Council, as Prime Minister Rudd said. We were last on from 1985 to 1986, so it's something that you don't get to do that often. The fact that we got such a positive response, 140 votes, a big, juicy, decisive win, as Minister Carr termed it, that shows that I think we are respected in the international community. We're also seen as being a constructive member and one that has to do a job. So it's not just a popularity contest. It's nice to be there, but it now means that we have to put in work and meet the expectations to really contribute.
And indeed, it puts us at the forefront of what could be some very tricky decisions. We saw last year the issue, or perhaps earlier this year, the issue of Palestinian observer status at the United Nations and how that really brought Australia's vote into place, a situation where you may have to offend one of your close allies and friends, or perhaps a country like the United States. How does Australia manage some of those dilemmas?
Look, it's certainly difficult. The downside of the spotlight is that people are noticing your decisions. If you look, for example, at so many of the conflicts in Africa, before our time on the Security Council, Australia would not have had a view. We would not really have had to form an opinion on an issue like Mali or a border dispute with Eritrea. But being on the Security Council means you have to take a position. Clearly on the Security Council it's not an equal playing field. The permanent five, the victors of the Second World War, the US, UK, France, China and Russia, they have a disproportionate share. They have a veto power, and if there's something that one of them doesn't want to happen, it just won't happen. And we see that right at the moment with Syria. But there is a lot of power for middle powers to advocate in the Security Council. You can see it in, say, 1994 when New Zealand pushed very hard against permanent five opposition to really get UN Security Council action on the genocide in Rwanda. I think Australia is being very active on the situation in Syria. Minister Carr has been pushing for access of medical supplies, of trying to make sure that hospitals and medical workers are protected. He's been pushing hard on the humanitarian side of the situation. So I think there's still room for countries to advocate and to push, even if it's against permanent five interests.
But when you look at the permanent five, of course, it's often said that Australia, because of our close relationship with the United States and our big trading relationship with China, could be a bridge between those two countries as well. Does our position now on the UN Security Council enhance that status?
Well, it's certainly useful for us in trying to improve our relations with all of the permanent five. We have consultations with them. We also have consultations with like-minded middle powers like South Korea, and that's very helpful. I'm not sure if I'd put our ambitions as high as being a bridge between China and the US. I think they have a number of ways to already talk to each other, and they don't need us as an intermediary. But we can be a voice of reason on a number of different topics, and that can be helpful.
Just finally, what is this going to, at the end of this term, what would you like for Australia to be able to look back and say that they were able to achieve?
It's a great question. I think what you want to leave is that legacy, to feel that you were part of the decisions that were the right decisions and that leave you on the right side of history. Now, some of them are going to be smaller things. So, for example, Australia has a role as the chairman of 3 different sanctions committees on Iran, on Taliban and on Al-Qaeda. And in those cases, we'd like to make some substantive contributions. We'd also like to improve the process that the UN use. So there's a lot of smaller things like that that we want to achieve. But we should also use our presidency months, one this September and one next December, to try to push forward agenda items that might not get as much play. September is going to be a little harder for us because of the election season, but luckily for us we get a second bite of the cherry, and we should be using that to push on items where we think we can make a contribution.
Once again, appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks very much.